I don't think that burnout is something to be completely avoided inside of a business. I think that burnout is part of the progression. So let me take you a step back here, because if you're just jumping on this video, you're like, who is this guy and why the heck is he telling me that burnout's okay? First and foremost, I don't think that burnout in the long definition is the right path, but there are levels of discomfort that are required for growth, which means there's seasonality. Seasonality inside of a business. If you're going to be growing your business, if you're going to be moving to the next level, if you want to achieve new things that you haven't achieved before, there will be times where you have to run a little bit hotter. You have to push the boundaries, push the edges on what is possible for you, for your capacity, for your team's capacity. But with the huge caveat that does not mean that that is the thing to sustain for long periods of time. Some may find that that's a month-long period. Others may find that a year or two. What's right for you is what's right for you. But the point is that there is an end, and that's what deviates burnout from pushing through the discomfort. So for those of you that are just landing on this video, who have no idea who I am, my name is Tanner O'Brien. I am the CEO of Action Coach Benefic Group, the author of The Ownership Advantage, and the founder of Benefic Marketing. I work with business owners every day, every week, working on things like this. How do we implement systems? How do we get the business to run so that it doesn't depend on the owner every single day? And ideally gives you some of that freedom back. So let's bring this back for a moment. Burnout. What is burnout? Burnout, as a definition for today, I'm going to define burnout as something that's not just being tired. It's the chronic depletion that happens when demands on you consistently outpace your ability to recover from it, physically, mentally, and emotionally. So this isn't just one bad week. This is a bad season that has no ending in sight. And that's why I think this is a seasonality thing. I don't know that it's the best to avoid burnout altogether, because to avoid burnout means that we may not be pushing hard enough for us to grow. However, when we take a look at this, it's important to understand that there are three areas to identify where burnout might be coming from and what we can do to overcome it. And that's what I'm going to share with you in this video. A quick story to get us started. I had a client come to me about 9 months ago now, and she was completely overworked. We're talking, you could just see it in her face, how she showed up, just dead tired, overworked, overwhelmed, so many different things. The business wasn't moving forward. And at the beginning of each coaching session, we have this thing called a focus sheet, and it gives us kind of a little bit of a rundown of what's going on. So she submits this focus sheet, and I kid you not, there's a couple layers in there of like, rate this out of 10, motivation level, 1 out of 10, value from coaching, 4 out of 10. And then she wrote this long note to describe what she was feeling, what was going on, because she wanted to help me understand it was not something about the coaching itself. It was just she was so tired, so overwhelmed by everything. So I said, okay, this is going to be the core thing, the core topic that we're going to spend time on in our session this week. As I do with all coaching sessions start with numbers. So I asked for her financials for us to take a look at. And there was one thing that stood out massively in these numbers that tied together everything that I'm going to share with you today. And it's something that you can go do the math on right as soon as this video is over. So let's get into it. I'm going to share with you the 3 T's of burnout. T number 1, time. So this is all about calendar, right? So one of my favorite exercises to do, and I'm going to invite you to do the same. If I'm in a large group of individuals, I'm going to ask them, how many of you feel like you're completely out of time? Have them all raise their hand. Usually we'll have at least half of the room that raise their hand. I say, okay, that's fantastic. I want you to keep your hands up in the air. For those of you that have your hands up in the air, you're completely out of time. How many of you are achieving every result that you would like to achieve in the business? The financial piece is there, the team building is there, your free, like all the stuff that you want, all the success metrics that you have. How many of you are also achieving those goals? And you see a whole bunch of hands come down. And this was the lesson that was taught to me that I had to share with these large groups, and ideally with you here through this conversation. If we are completely out of time, and we are not achieving the goals that we have set out to achieve, then we are misallocating this resource of time. And it's a really painful one because as a business owner, there's so many things that feel like they are priority, but there are certain things that have higher leverage than others. So taking a minute to take a look at your entire calendar, write down all the things that are happening. So if you've done a time study or a time audit or something like that in the past, this is what we're talking about. You go and do an audit of everything that's happening because it can be very easy to feel busy, to spin our wheels and go nowhere. This is doing the work that doesn't drive the most important things within the business, especially if we're early on in the journey. All we have most of the time for small businesses is time. We are not highly capitalized. So we have to trade time for money. And if we're trading our time for things that don't generate the money, generate the revenue, this is where we start getting into the spinning our wheels. The business doesn't grow and we feel like we have all of these things, all of this weight on our shoulders that doesn't get us anywhere. So we have to get really good at prioritizing and seeing what is on the calendar, which pieces drive the business forward, because the goal is to generate the revenue, generate the money that allows us then to take that money to buy back some of the rest of our time through team members, through systems, through technology. Our goal is to trade time for money and then money for time. But if we're not spending our time in the right buckets, this is where some of that burnout feeling comes in, because it's very difficult to see what we're doing, where it's going, and how we allocate this resource of time. So this is the first T of burnout. The second component of this, before I move on to the second T, is how we structure time for ourselves. So many of you watching may resonate with this. If you have clients, you have customers, you have people that you work with one-to-one, you sit down, you're in a prospect meeting, a client meeting, a customer meeting, something like that, and your phone rings. Do you answer it? Now, again, when I ask this in large groups, almost everybody's like, no, I would never answer my phone. And of course you wouldn't. You're fantastic at what you do, and you're going to focus on the person in front of you. So the question here is, when you block time for yourself, if you don't do that, start. When you block time for yourself, whether it's 15 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour a day, where you put it in the calendar, you say, this is the time for me. If your phone rings, and it's a client, it's a prospect, it's some fire that's popping up, do you answer it? And what's crazy is most people say, well, yes, of course I would. So why do you value your client's time more than your own? It's very hard to overcome burnout if we're never willing to give ourselves the same grace, the same time, the same focus and energy as we would give to the people that we serve. So these are the top two things that you can control and look at today when it comes to calendar or time. So let's get into T number 2, team. And team specifically as it relates to the organizational chart. So if I were to ask you to draw your org chart today, whether you have just you on the team or you've got a couple team members or maybe a ton of team members, I want you to draw your org chart. Oftentimes when I go through this exercise, and I sat down with my client that I shared with you earlier, we did the same exercise. I had her go up to the whiteboard and draw her org chart. And she put her name up at the top, and she had, this person over here and this person over here and this person over here, and they do this and they do this, and kind of some lines from her down into each of these. Maybe this person over here has somebody else that they manage. And that was kind of the org chart. It's like, that's fantastic. We have everybody up on the board. We know what's going on. Now I want you to do a slightly different variation of this. Let's draw what I'm going to call a proper org chart as far as a structure of a business goes. And what that's going to look like is up here at the top, you're going to have a box that says CEO. And you're going to draw a little line. You're going to go a horizontal line across, and you're going to draw 6 boxes. Marketing, sales, operations, which is the fulfillment or doing of the service that you provide, finance, HR, and then IT. Now that we have these boxes, I want you to take that same group of people and put them under where they go. So you take this person, they put them over here, and this person, they go here. It's like, okay, that's fantastic. Now I want you to put an owner in every single one of these boxes. So who owns this? Who is the CEO? Who owns that role? Well, I do, right? As the owner of the business. Okay, great. Let's go to marketing. Who owns marketing? Well, I've got this team over here that kind of does some stuff, but really I'm responsible to my name. Okay, cool. Sales. Well, I'm the only one doing sales, so it's my name. Operations. A little bit of me, a little bit of team. Name goes in the box. And you go through this entire exercise. And what you'll find is, more than likely, your name's in a lot more boxes than you realize it is. This is what happened with my client. She went through this process and her name was in almost every single one of these boxes. But the crazier finding is this entire team that she had, probably 6 or 7 people on the team outside of her, every single one of those individuals lived under operations. All the fulfillment, all the doing of the service in that business, that's where the team lived. Nobody under marketing, nobody under sales, nobody really under finance, nobody under HR and team, nobody under IT. So it was really fascinating when I asked the follow-up question that ties back to T number 1 on time. In all of these buckets, how much of your time is going to each one of them? What we found was 50% of her time was still going into operations. So she had a team built out for operations, but she was still taking 50% of her time in that one bucket, which means sales was not happening at the level it could be, marketing was not happening at the level it could be, the operational side of the business with finance and HR and things like that was not happening at the level it should be within the business. So there was very little growth. And what this led to was a conversation of understanding that she had not trusted herself enough yet to fully let the team own the bits that they have within the company. Every questionable decision, every piece that they were a little unsure on, all had to be routed back to her. And she still felt compelled to sign off on everything before it went to the client. Now, while some of this is not necessarily a bad thing, it was really eye-opening to see where her time was going. Because of that, business is not growing and all these other things that led to this burden, this weight on her shoulders that said, I have now allocated my resource of money, actual capital, into having people on my team to do different aspects of the business, but it has not freed up my time. So I have not fully bought back time. I've only partially done it, and this is why I'm feeling some burnout. So a little bit of a calendar exercise, a little bit of an org chart exercise to find where these pieces are going. And oftentimes for many of us in small businesses, it's more about letting go than it is this idea of delegation. Yes, we want to bring on people, but do I trust myself enough yet to let that go? So this is part number 2, the exercise number 2 to go through. Team. So let's go to number 3. T number 3 is terms. The offer, what you provide. So I'm going to lay this out in an example with this client, and I think this will completely sum up what this one is all about. This particular client, as she was looking at all the different things that were happening inside of the business, she realized one major thing was happening: scope creep. They would have a client that they would have some work with, and they would plan and bill for about 3 hours of work. Their staff would be staffed up and prepared for 3 hours of work. But then, there'd be some communication throughout the project, and the client would say, well, can we just add this little thing, or can we do this, or can we change this? And all of a sudden, you've got 3 hours of work that now takes 10. The team hasn't grown. The client's not being billed for anything differently. So all of a sudden, we have 7 unaccounted for hours that eats away at the profitability, which means we don't have money to staff up properly. We're so afraid of losing the client that now we're allowing us to cannibalize our own business as a result of over-servicing this particular client. And this is a result of not knowing where the boundaries are, custom writing every single client agreement, and not knowing how to have the conversation with the clients because we're so fearful that we'll lose them if we let them know that going from 3 hours to 10 hours is a bit more work. And the only way we can sustain that for you is to be able to provide that at a level of service that requires an investment. This was the number that I saw in the financials. Saw revenue was flat, and we saw that 72% of all of her revenue was going to payroll. And it was at its core because of these 2 things we just talked about. The fact that all of her team was in fulfillment and her time was also going to fulfillment. So we weren't growing the business from another aspect, and we were over servicing, which because of that was leading to why she had to continue to spend so much time in the fulfillment bucket. These were massive findings. And because we found them, because we diagnosed where these friction points were, we were able to take steps to move it forward. It wasn't I feel burnout because it's this big, crazy term. It's just all of these things happening at once. It was there are specific things happening within the business that, if identified, we can work towards a solution that gives us the freedom, the ability back. And this is why I believe that burnout is more about understanding where do we push to the edge and know that we can come back as long as we can see what's causing us to start skipping into the level of burnout that's consistent. Hard seasons ultimately come to an end, but they only come to an end if we do these exercises, if we do the audit of our time, if we do the management of our team, and we understand the core terms that are required for us to deliver our service. Now, look, I recognize that this is an exercise that probably can't be done in 5 minutes. That's why, for those of you that want a little bit of extra guidance, that want somebody to walk you through this process, putting a link in the description below for 2 weeks with our Action Coach team to take you through this exercise for you specifically. I've put all of this knowledge culminated into a book called The Ownership Advantage. It launches here in just a couple of months, and if you want on the waiting list, link is in the description below. We'll send you some bonus chapters, some previews, get you excited for the overall launch. Link is in the description below. As always, stay tuned, keep with me each week, and let's go build some amazing businesses together.